This conference will now be recorded.
So in the last session we are at getting attribute. So let me quickly run this to just recap what we have automated in the last session, and from there we can move forward understanding different other operations. What is this? Let me restart my workspace. I'm not sure why it's why is this coming? ORC dot selenium virtual authenticator has virtual authenticator. Okay, so we are here, right? So we are able to even get what is there in the text. So we have encountered different methods in this particular flow. We understood what is click, what is find element, what is find elements, get attribute, get text, clear, and send keys, right? So today what we're gonna do is we will come back here. So what I want to do here is I just want to click on OK here, and then navigating back to the old screen. Okay, so we cannot identify this element on the inspector. Okay, so let me even connect to the inspector as well. So we got connected to the inspector. So we are at this particular point now, right? So where are we? Let me open this API demos. So we are in preferences and default values. So if you try to inspect anything in this region, our intention is to come back to the old screen. The only way we could do is we just have to click on this button, which is backward button, but it's outside of our app, and so we will not be able to control this. But how do we actually go to the last screen? By clicking on this in what do we say, in Appium is something which we're gonna look at today. And also uh, what I want to show you is this enable and disable buttons. Okay, so we will come back here. In preference dependencies, we need to validate whether Wi-Fi settings is disabled or not. And once we check this, we should be able to actually see this enabled. So when this checkbox is disabled, this has to be in disabled state. Okay, so this is something that we need to validate, and then go to Wi-Fi settings, enter something, click on OK. This is already you're aware of. It's like just a text box and entering some text into it, and coming out of it. All right, so the one thing that you have to understand is how to validate whether a particular button is enabled based on the other element state. Here, based on the checkbox, we should validate whether the Wi-Fi settings is disabled or enabled. So coming back, what else we could go ahead and do is, yeah, so this is one kind of button that we should be able to actually operate on. Enable switching the button from on state to off state. How to actually do this and how to validate whether the button is enabled or not is something that we will go ahead and see. We already covered this checkbox, right? So these are some of the flows. Once these are completed, we will move on with the advanced options like dragging and dropping and all that kinds of stuff. So if you go to views, so here you could see drag and drop. So you should be able to drag and drop these. Drag and start to drag. Why is this not working? Okay, so look at this. So we are able to actually drag and drop this, right? So just need to drag a button for a long time, and then we just need to do this. Okay, so these kind of operations we're gonna see. So uh, once we do a long press on it, and then when we move it from one place to another place, it's not actually responding. So we are interested in this drag and drop. So the moment we hold something, uh, oh god, drag and drop is not actually responding. uh, Let me reopen this app, go to views, drag and drop, and then we will just move this from one spot to the other spot. Just hold it and run these kind of operations, tapping a button, drag and drop, and performing multiple
उद्याला
actions like
कितीला जायचंय
long press.
उद्याच गेला सायकल घेऊन
Can
न
you
त्याला कधीपासून येतो सायकल येताना थोडा लाईट हे असेल लाईटला हे दिलेत
can everyone be on mute? Prerana, I guess. Yeah. So these are few things, I mean few advanced things we will be covering today, but let's finish the basic ones and let's come back over here. So the first thing I would like to do is, we are at preferences now. So we are on this text box, like default values, edit text preferences, and here is where we are. So here we want to click on this OK button, and then we want to navigate back from this screen to the back, which is like from here to this. Okay, that's our next intention. So we are getting the text in the text box and we want to click on that OK button. So can I use this OK button directly to click on it? Can I use this button directly to click on it or not?
Can you show that screen again? I mean, the simulator.
Yeah. So let me explain you the flow. This is what we are doing. So we are clicking on it, edit text preferences, enter some text, click on OK, and then we clicked on edit preferences and we are reading the value inside this and we are printing that. And now I want to click on this OK button. This OK button is that. So I am actually instantiating this OK button when I'm actually entering the text, and then I'm actually going ahead and clicking on it and getting the text on it. So will this OK button work here or not if I directly give it like this?
I think you need to instantiate it
Yes,
again.
Should work.
This should
it will
work.
work directly.
Okay, let's just quickly run this and see. If you remember, yesterday we ran into few issues, right? So that's the reason we are actually reinstantiating these buttons and then we are clicking on it. You remember that?
Yes, yes,
Yes.
sir.
So why do we actually instantiated these objects again? And what is the error that we have got if we haven't instantiated that and we are directly operating on them?
Stale element.
Still element reference.
Yeah, stale element references. What does stale element reference means?
Element is not in the
Element
page.
is not in that.
Element is not in the page.
So in that case, this OK button will be there or you will get stale element reference.
It's there, but uh,
Yeah, there
you
is a pause.
navigated back to a different page and you're coming back, right? So
Yeah, so in
this
that
error,
case,
it should happen.
they should
You need
work
to
is what you're saying.
reinstantiate. No, it shouldn't work if it's the same.
Yeah,
So
it
yeah, it
shouldn't work
shouldn't.
because we are actually going back from that page to another page and then we are coming back to that page. So the element reference which you are storing earlier will no more valid because the references for that new object will get changed automatically. So if you use something which you have already instantiated and when you're getting away from that screen and coming back that screen, and you cannot expect that object to work again, so you actually need to read that back again and then you have to use that. Okay. uh, so this
But
is
I think
something. Mhm.
this is a case only for mobile apps, I guess, right? If it's a web page, it doesn't happen that way, right? I mean, even if you navigate back, if you're given a proper ID or something, unique ID, I think it will work. But for mobile, I think it's a problem, I guess, right?
For even for web pages, we have seen that, I remember, because I showed you that example too. When you traverse from one page to another page, and if you're using the same reference which you have read earlier, it will throw you stale element reference. If you are using something like page object model or page factories, then you will not actually encounter that because that framework is designed to handle that. But when you're
Okay, so for
developing
mobile,
scripts like this, yeah, it's same for
for mob
Selenium and mobile. It's not different. So when
So,
you're Mhm.
Mohan, so if we use a page factory and a page object model POM with mobile applications, it will work the way it works for web applications?
Yes, Page Factory will automatically gets its elements loaded whenever the page is actually, I mean, it checks for the latest objects. It eliminates this issue. Still, I mean, Page Factories and Page Factory specifically.
Okay, thank you.
So the
So just from the programming point of view, when an element is when the object is this one, it should be the value should be stored in the OK button, right? So the value will be there, but it will be in inactive mode or something.
no, it's actually a reference, and every reference will have an ID.
So
Let's
even
look
though
at
it's a
how this
local,
web element basically looks like when we actually run this. I'm running this in debug mode now instead of actually running it, and let's see how this OK button looks for us. So we will enter into this debug mode now, and now let's just try to inspect how this OK button looks like. So it has some ID which is reference for that. Okay, so this is the reference of that particular element. Okay, I'm copying this, getting it into a notepad. So this is when this object is on the home page. Now what you are doing, you are clicking on that button and you are going away from that screen, right? And then you're coming back to the screen, and if you try to use the same reference which is no more there on the web page and it got vanished, and it it will already, I mean, whenever it reads the element for the next time, it gets a new reference ID. That's what you're gonna see now. So let me put a breakpoint over here as well and continue the execution. And you could see now the new OK button got instantiated, and this will have a different identifier altogether. Oh, we are getting the same ID too. This is reference calculated from it. Okay, let me just see if the ID is different or not. I mean, these identifiers are coming as same, but something should be different. Obviously, let me just see if the ID is coming as different or not. Where are we? Let me get everything and see how this looks like. So here OK button has ID 32, Android ID, everything has some IDs. Okay, let's capture these IDs and store it somewhere. So I got this now. Let me expand this maybe. New. So these are the parameters we're getting for OK button. The ID is 22. Let me come back to the execution. Guess this device got stopped. Debug as Java application. Okay, let's just quickly see what is this looking like. Inspect. Okay, expression. This is what we got, and let me run the script again. Now we got here. Let's look for this OK button. This OK button has different ID now. Look at this. The ID of this OK button is different to what we have captured earlier. Okay, so if you have a look at this, ID is coming as different for the OK button that we have seen earlier and the one that you are using right now. So now we have 101 and earlier ID has 82. So because of this ID change, I mean, the ID is changing just because we are actually moving away from the screen and we are coming back again. So I guess I'm not 100% sure the whatever code that you are seeing over here is something is generated from its properties, whether it's XPath or something. That this XPath is converted as this ID, and this ID will be used by the Selenium to actually identify that particular element. So that's the reason whenever you have the same XPath, you will get the same code, but ID is getting changed. So ID is getting changed every time that you will get a new code. So now when you load the new screen, it will have a new ID or new reference, a new reference screen. So when you are trying to identify that element with this ID, it will not actually able to identify that. So that is something why you will get stale element reference when you're actually trying to find out the element with the old references. But now if you actually run the script, the screen got collapsed, but this OK button will work. You could even try when you're actually doing this, and you could just double click on this, run this as a debug mode, double click on this, and you could add this to watch, or you could even inspect that on the fly to actually if you could capture the ID of you, or you remember the ID. So the next time you would see when the screen is getting reloaded, you'll get a different ID. And you could also find immediately by reading this OK button on the same screen. If you read this twice, both the OK buttons will look same and they will have the same IDs. But when the screen is getting changed, or when it is coming back from another screen to this screen, you will get a different ID. Okay, I just misunderstood this is not the ID. Actually, this is something which will be generated. It's a hexadecimal code generated based on the XPath or the identifier that you're giving. So it converts that into this hexadecimal code, and that code will be used to identify that particular element, because again, it's a binary language that computer always works on, right? So that's something, or ID is something which you have to look for always. Is that clear?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
What I was about to tell you is navigating back from that OK button to back, I mean to the last page. For that we have a syntax called as driver dot navigate dot, we will have forward and backward methods over here, I mean back and forward. So when you say back, it comes, it's just like clicking on this particular button, on the back button. So if you go here, if you click on this back button, it doesn't mean that it comes to the old state, I mean the old state of that particular screen. Okay, it's just like clicking on this button. So when you write the script, you could come from anywhere to anywhere. You could even give it multiple number of times, so that those many screens will be, I mean the script will come back those many number of steps. So let's quickly run this and see whether this is working or not. And also let me put some weights so that you could actually observe this. So if I run this, so it's just navigating back. Okay, so 1 2, yes we have 3, right? Yeah, so we navigated back thrice, so it was just like clicking on this button thrice. So that's how we could navigate back from the screen. All right, so this is what is required for us. So once we are on that particular screen, then what we are trying to understand is, so now we understood how to navigate back as well. Now we are on this particular screen, I guess, right? So once we click on navigate back, we will come back here. Here we have to click on preference dependencies, and then initially this has to be in disable state, and then once you click on this or check this checkbox, this has to be enabled. How to actually check whether this is checked or not? The checkbox is checked or unchecked?
Please select.
Property.
We have to check the attribute text is true or not.
Right. So we need to check for the relevant attribute. Earlier we found it as a checked, right? So let's, the same way this is gonna work, like the button which we are talking about. This is enabled or disabled will also have some property, and you have to actually use that property to check, I mean to make sure this is enabled or not. Okay. So for that, what we have to do is we just have to inspect that, inspect the required elements, and then we just have to put some conditional statements and get the relevant attributes and attribute values. Okay, so now we have to preferences and then preference dependencies. We also need preference dependencies. We just need to click on preference dependencies as well, right? So we need to get the element for that, or else we don't actually need that, because we wrote a reusable component for that, and we could just directly use that, right? So right, for now I'm just copying the whole code and pasting it over here, but you could even put this in in another class, in another method, and you could directly call that over here. Option to click. Okay, so what's the value of that which we want to click? It's preference dependencies. or you could simply pass dependencies because it is just checking contains only. So for now I am passing it as dependencies. Dependencies. So it clicks on this preference dependencies. Once it clicked on this, we just need to inspect the Wi-Fi settings button and the relevant details on it. So if you go back here and if you inspect this Wi-Fi settings, uh, so just let's concentrate on this enabled flag. So enabled flag is false right now. So let's get that enabled and see if something is changing over here or not. So I'm just trying to refresh the screen and let's inspect the element again. And now see for the enabled is true now. Okay, so you could use this property enabled to check whether the button is enabled or disabled. So when it gets enabled, when you click on checkbox, it should get enabled or else it shouldn't get enabled. So before that, we also need to identify that element, right? So how do you actually identify that element now? Instead of the parent element, you could also even use this directly, the title. The title also has enabled a flag and it also have some unique properties. Text is equal to Wi-Fi settings. So you could use this text is equal to Wi-Fi settings and you could construct an XPath and use that XPath to actually identify this element. So now I'll do the same. What I'll do here is I'll try to identify the web element now. So web element, uh, what is that web element name? Wi-Fi settings. Button is equal to driver dot find element by dot path // at the rate text is equal to what is the value? Wi-Fi settings is a value. So copy that, paste it over here, and with this you will be good. Now what we have to assert, and we also need this checkbox also, right? Because after checking on the checkbox, you actually have to validate that. And let me actually identify this checkbox as well. What could be the unique identifier for this?
ID.
ID.
I
Yeah, we could go ahead and use ID. So web element Wi-Fi checkbox is equal to driver dot find element by dot xpath and dot checkbox. So now we identified both the elements. And now let me know how this actually works. So when we are actually, we already read, I mean, let's suppose the initial state of the application is like this. So now we actually got the identifiers for both the objects, right? So we got identifier for this checkbox and also for this Wi-Fi settings button. Now when I'm clicking on this, there is a change in the screen, right? So this is getting enabled after clicking on this, but initially this is not getting enabled. So after clicking on this, do I need to read this object, or it's fine if I use this object before even clicking on this? I mean, you got my question. So now in this state, I'm taking the objects. Now I enabled it, the state got changed. So will I get stale element error? I mean stale element reference error, or I won't get this, because I'm just wondering, like, this is getting enabled. I mean the screen is getting changed and this is getting enabled after clicking on this, right? So in this case, if I read that object beforehand, will I get stale element reference if I use this object later to check whether that is enabled or not?
You may. I mean, since the state is changing, I don't know, maybe.
Okay, so you're thinking we will be getting stale element reference, right?
No, sir, it is in the same page,
Same
right?
page, so maybe no.
Yeah, so we shouldn't get stale element reference error because we are not changing the object, only the properties of the object is changing. So when we enable this or disable this, so the object is not changing, the properties which is enabled is changing, right? So only the enabled is getting updated as true or false, but the ID will not change because we are on the same page. So in the same page we will get the same object, but in that object we will get some properties getting changed. So that's the catch which you have to understand over here. So let's just quickly check, like by clicking on this Wi-Fi settings button checkbox. Let's validate whether the checkbox is like in enabled state or not, means checked or not, and also Wi-Fi settings button should be enabled for us. So I'm just doing a click on this. So once the checkbox is clicked, I am trying to validate whether the checkbox is enabled or not. Validating.
So I have a question.
Uh-huh.
In line number 91, by XPath, you gave it as such the
Sorry,
ID.
it should be ID.
Okay.
It's not gonna work. Validating checkbox. So get attribute, and what is, let's find out what is that is capturing the uh, status of the checkbox. That should be checked, right? So let's validate this checked. Okay, and then we should also be getting Wi-Fi settings button. Validating Wi-Fi settings button state. So Wi-Fi settings button dot get attribute, and what is that? Enable, right? So the other one would be enabled. So just copy this, go back here and paste it here. So now we got both of them. Like, so once we click on it, we should get this as true, and the button enabled has to be true. Again, when we uncheck this, dot click will again uncheck that button, and then now both of them has to be unchecked. Validating checkbox unchecked, button state after uncheck. I guess this is gonna be vice versa, because initially that would be in disabled state, right? So once it is in disabled state, when we click on it, it gets enabled. So once it gets enabled, we will get both of them as true, and then again when we click on it, okay, that will get unchecked, and we should get both of them as false. Now let's see whether we get stale element reference, or we will just get the required actions happen without any errors. um, we should get rid of this flow from next time. Why is this error? Navigate.back doesn't work, I guess. That and sleep. We will we will deal all these synchronizations at one point. Let's go with static weights for now because many of others are not aware of this Selenium stuff. I think so. So let's discuss them later. Let's go with static sleep for now. Okay, so once we check them, both of them are true, and if we don't, once we uncheck that, both of them got unchecked. So that's how we will validate whether any button is enabled or not, and the dependency of one state of one button on the another button. Is this clear?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
So now we are good with this. So after this, what we have to do, we have to navigate back again, right? So for navigating back again, we just have to use driver.navigate.back, and let's keep the flow because it won't take much time, but we will understand these kind of dependencies when we traverse from screen to screen. If it is a straight flow, we will not see these kind of errors. Okay, and then what is next? What is our next intention is we just need to click on switch and then have to see how to actually enable this and disable that particular part. So before that, I just want to add navigate, control C, control V, and then what I just need to do, I need to click on switch, right? I need to click on switch. So we already have the code for that, and I'm getting this, pasting it here, and this has to be switch now. It has to be switched now. So I just need to get this enabled or disabled. I have to validate. First thing is I just need to validate whether this is in enabled state or not, and then if it is like enabled, I just have to uh, disable that. If that is disabled, I should be able to enable that. So just validate both things. So for that, what we have to do, we just have to inspect the required elements, and then we have to do the stuff, required actions. Again, the concept would be same, just get the relevant attribute and then do the operation on it. I mean, do the validation on it. That's all we are going to do for any kind of elements. Okay, so click on views, sorry, click on preferences, click on switch, and this is the button of our interest. I mean, let me refresh this page, and then you could see this. Just we need to identify this button. So the unique identifier of this would be, what would be the unique identifier for this? Any idea? Is there any
Resource
unique
ID.
identifier?
Resource ID.
Resource ID.
Switch widget resource ID. If you use that, what happens is, let's see. If you are using that, let's identify this element. This will also have the same resource ID. So in some case, if you want to actually operate on this and you are using this ID, it actually picks this this switch, not this switch, because it gets the first switch of that preference. I mean, of the matched objects, right? So this wouldn't be unique because if we have only one switch, that's fine if you use this, but we have two switches and both the switches will have the same resource ID. So in such a cases, you cannot go ahead and use uh, that resource ID. If you think this as Selenium, how do you actually identify that button or switch statement? From where do you come to that particular? I mean, you should relate something with that switch preference to that button, right? So if you're able to construct something in relation with the switch preference name and the button, that would be the unique identifier. How could you do that?
Is it text? Because it's on and off, maybe.
On and off would also be the same for this button as well, right?
This one has text S and that one has off.
The reason why you're getting text as yes and no is this is enabled, so it is yes. If you disable this, obviously you'll get no. uh, let's check this. So if this is disabled, if the button is disabled, you'll get the text as off. Okay, so let's do it this
When
way. uh So let's try to link
using
up
the
the name with the
index.
button. With the XPath, let's try to link up the name with the button. Okay, let's try to do that. So we got switch preferences. So when you get even you could give it try with this way. So what is happening if I click on switch preferences? Even if I click on switch preferences, it is actually getting enabled and disabled, right? Can I directly go ahead and use this and click on this?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that is one option you could actually give it a try. For now, let's identify the switch preference and use that and see whether this is getting enabled or disabled. Okay. So even then, what happens is, let me tell you one thing. So you are trying to find out this text switch preferences, and you are saying like when you click on this it is getting enabled, and when you unclick on this or uncheck this is getting disabled. But the property of text is off or on is on this particular object, which is not the same object. So you're getting the property out of another object and you're clicking on another object. So again, when you're trying to identify this particular object, which is switch widget, um, so this is somewhere else, and again you have to identify this to check whether it is on or off, right? So on the final note, we anyways need this object. It's not sufficient to actually get this object and do some actions on it. I mean, it will not cover a requirement because the final requirement is to get the state of this button as well, right? So it is somewhere here and the title is somewhere here, and if you perform action on it, we don't have any object on this. On the final note, we have to identify this button. You're getting that?
Yeah.
So the only solution is we need to link up this with this. On a note, we just have to identify an element by linking this and this. You know how to do that in XPath, right? We have seen parent, children, ancestors, all this stuffs we have studied in Selenium, right? So the same stuff we're going to use it over here too. So from here I'll go to the parent. In that parent I'll come back to the switch widget. So here is where I am. So this is unique identifier. I'll go to this parent, which is the whole division, and from this parent I'll be coming back to this switch widget. So that's how I'll traverse. I'll identify the element with this, and I'll go to its parent, which is the whole division. In that division I'll come back to the switch. Similarly, if I have to, okay, so switch preference is also unique for both these buttons. What is not unique? This is not unique. This is switch with custom text. This is what we have to use. Instead of switch preference, what I have to do is I have to identify the element with this is text, and I have to go to its parent and its parent again. I have to go two parents up and then come back to the switch widget. So how do I construct the XPath for this? Anyone? Have you remembered that like we used parent to identify the elements in?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yes.
So first of all, I have to identify this particular element, which
Mhm.
is the summary, using text is equal to summary. This is which, and from here I'll go to
Parent,
parent.
Parent.
double colon.
parent double colon. What I have to give it over here?
Again, the tag name. Parent.
So we will give the tag name in Selenium, but what is the tag name here?
Uh, Android widget relative layer.
So in Android, in
Linear
Appium,
layer.
the class name would be the tag name. Just
Yeah.
remember that. So the tag for any element, the tag name would be the class name, because you could see this is the tag name, and the tag name falls under class name. Or else, instead of giving that big name, you could just give star. Okay, even star works because star takes anything. And again from here, I'll be going to one parent tab because I have two parents, and from that I just need to come down. So I will go back. I'll go one parent up, and from there I'll come down to my widget, and here I could go ahead and use the resource ID, which is this one. So the resource ID would be /star at the rate resource ID and the value of it. Let's copy this and paste it over here. So now let's see if this is working or not. And go scroll up, inspect, and we are trying to identify that with the next path and paste it over here. Click on search. So once you select this, it's getting enabled, right? So now instead of this, I'll just change this to with custom text. So now this XPath, which is dynamic, should be able to identify this button now instead of the above button. When I click on search, if I inspect this, it's highlighting the second button. So now we actually made this as unique, right, or dynamic, right, by
So,
tagging it with relevant text.
so I have a question.
Yeah.
So using this XPath, does it affect performance? Like
Yes, it
for
will. So I already mentioned this in Selenium class, I guess. So if you could preferably use ID or any single XPath, I mean single identifiers, it would be more performance efficient than XPaths. XPaths will actually try to traverse down through all the lanes till it find out from top to bottom. We are not sure about the internal architecture, but XPath is little so in terms of performance. Uh, when when you talk about performance, but you wouldn't see that in real-time environment. So it's not so complex, or it will not take so much of time. But theoretically, it is given that XPath takes more time when compared to other identifiers.
yeah, I mean here and there should be fine, but if you're trying to identify all the elements like this, I think it will definitely affect performance, right?
Yeah, it should, but you will go ahead and use IDs wherever you could do, or if there are
Yeah,
any
yes.
accessibility IDs you're going to do. But in this case, you don't have any other option to go ahead and use it.
Okay.
When you want to make your functions more reusable, XPath would be the only thing that that would actually cover your requirement, right? Because even with IDs you could do that, but IDs again should actually in sync with what you are actually creating. So then you could actually create the reusable components with XPath. But it's always when you're creating reusable components for multiple actions with a single function, it's most probable that you're going to use XPaths. In terms of performance, even I mean I ran around 2.5 hours of script in one of the applications. But even if you make it all as CSS, I mean we just gave a try for improving um, the performance by doing whatever we could do, and one such thing that we have done is we just changed everything to CSS, even when they are not unique. But we haven't seen so much performance improvement, not even seconds. We haven't seen that because of that. I'm not sure what is the reason, but theoretically, if you ask me, and what I have heard and studied is XPath is little slow in performance, but we have done practically for one of the cases in one of the application, but we practically haven't seen so much difference in terms of execution time. When you actually do multi-threading, if you're aware of multi-threading, if you do multi-threading, it actually gets you the execution time more down when compared to anything else. Multi-threading or multi-server executions, those will actually improve the performance a lot. These things like changing to XPath and CSS will not actually show so many effects. I recently have automated an application where we have millions of documents that needs to be validated and processed, and I'll say you the statistics or whatever I have remembered. We tested that using 500 documents, and it took us, if we ran that on a single thread, it took us around 45 minutes for 500 documents execution. And we split that as on, we converted that as threads. We got that done in 5 minutes, I guess. That's the drop you would see when you use multi-threading or multi-server executions. It's like just multiplication of time, and these are like negligible when you actually see that. So that really doesn't matter if you ask me practically, whether you use XPath or IDs or CSSs, but theoretically it is there. But I'm not sure what's the reason and what kind of applications it actually involves with. Uh, that's something which I have done really, and that's my observation. And maybe
Okay.
there could be some edge cases where they really matters, but as per my experience, this is what I have observed. Anyways, so this is how we're gonna mm, construct a unique identifier using an XPath for these elements.
Yeah, I have a question for you.
Mhm.
Yeah, actually, in Selenium, we use like selector hub or crowbar to generate the XPath engine to save the time. Is there any other extension for Appium we can use to generate the XPath or CSS selector?
No, as per my knowledge, it is not actually there for any extension. I don't even, I haven't encountered that. To my knowledge, I'm not sure whether there are any such extensions, but to my knowledge, they are not there. We have to actually build them.
Oh,
And you could see this, right? So let me just copy this. This is only giving us an unique identifier for this, but we don't want to go ahead and use this. It picks up the best identifiers for us, and we are open to use this, but as this is too long, we're not going to use this. Even the
right.
same with the extensions that are there with are there for Selenium as well, right? They are not 100%.
Accurate. No,
So
it's not
yeah,
accurate. That's correct.
yeah,
Especially for the dynamic XPath, it's not reliable.
yes,
We have to be
yes.
in the background.
Yes, even for normal XPaths, it behaves the same way. So it is even giving us, the APM inspector itself is giving us the unique identifiers that we could go ahead and use, but they are not something that are really usable. We have to actually make it short or more precise. Again, if we have to integrate something, it is not something we could do because it's a separate tool that has been given by the APM itself, right? APM inspector is something which is given by APM inspector itself. APM guys itself. So they have to actually integrate something into it.
Thank you.
You have UI automator, uh, but that is like far less or far less in terms of performance when compared to APM inspector. But there is no point of actually discussing that. But a UI automator is something which could be used to identify the elements on Android devices. If you actually want to have a look at that, it will be there in the SDK as well. In the Android SDK itself, you could find UI automator, and you could use that. But there is no point of actually studying that too, because it's like far less better than APM inspector. It has many drawbacks, and it's in terms of performance as well. It cannot pick up the hierarchy of the app, or it just picks up the properties, that's all, and not so many properties that APM inspector is actually giving up. But to your knowledge, APM SDK itself is coming up with an UI, with a tool called as UI Automator that could have even identify the elements. But again, that is like uh, no point of studying it out, no point of knowing it as well. But just for your reference, I'm just saying, because this is like 100% better than that particular tool which is coming as inbuilt.
So, just
It works only for Android only too. It don't work for iOS, whereas an Appium Inspector works for both Android and iOS. We will shortly see creating a simulator on Xcode and how it actually works, and how do we actually inspect the elements on simulator using Appium Inspector. Uh, Maybe in the next session I'll get that done for you. But this is the whole concept of actually um, whole concept with inspecting elements on Android devices or mobile devices. We have only best option, that is Appium Inspector, and only the best tool that we do have is Appium.
So even with using this XPath,
Mhm.
suppose a something new gets added on the screen, it can break
Mhm.
the XPath, right? I mean, whatever we are giving, like a new switch under the same parent, something else gets added on the screen, and that will break the XPath that we are giving, right?
It's not gonna break XPath, right? So if something is getting added in the hierarchy, the advantage of XPath is that the relative XPath specifically, it's not absolute XPath. When you're talking about relative XPath, even if something is getting added in between, it's not gonna break that.
Or if the parent changes, let me put it that way.
You could even do that, right? You could give unique properties of the parent. We just gave two parents, but in this case, now let me just take a backup of it, maybe better. So there is an option for us. Instead of this, you could give a unique identifiers for this star. Okay, after this star, you could even add a parameters for this, something like at the rate, and the parameters that uniquely identifies that particular parent. Let's come back to this case. uh, I hope we discussed this as well. So you want to identify this parent, right? So if you want to identify this particular parent, you could use something like class, or if you have any unique identifiers, you could go ahead and use this particular unique identifiers, so that you could bring down one hierarchy inside that. So you could remove this, and what you could do is, instead of this star, add that particular class name at the rate class, uh, and this parent will be ancestor now. It's no more gonna be a parent. Ancestor class is equal to, and the name of that particular class. What is this? Android widget linear layout. uh, and this is how you could actually bring down one particular parent. But in terms of length, it would be the same, and we just have two parents. There is no harm adding two parents over like this, because both of them are in terms of length, both of them would be same, and this would be a direct stuff. Just going one parent up is a direct instruction, whereas searching for the ancestor again with some parameters. Okay, when you have multiple parents or big hierarchy, then you could use ancestors, and there are many other methods that are available in the XPath, like following siblings, and you could just make better use of them, and you could construct minimal XPaths.
Okay.
Yeah. So for now, let me go ahead and use this, because we are actually not directly using that. We are tagging the unique name in that particular division to that particular switch button, so that we were able to actually effectively operate on that. So if you just give the switch button every time when you want to, it always operates on this button only, because this is the first identified element with that particular parameters. So you could never go to the second button or second switch button even when you want to actually operate on this button. So the only solution would be to tag the name of that particular button with that particular, particular name with that particular button. So that's how you have to gonna do it. So now I clicked on switch, and now it's just like driver dot find element. You just need to give by dot path, and you just will give it's looking too big, but that should be fine for now. Bring it to the next line. Dot. So now we are clicking on it, and then we just need to validate. Let me put this in a web element. That would be more easy. Web element name of this would be switch with context. Switch with some underscore text is equal to. So I'll just click on this and go to the end, put a semicolon. So I'm clicking on this, and also I'm trying to get the state text out of it, because when it is on or off, we will just get different text. Okay, so what I'll do is I'll just print out that particular context. This out, status of switch button. So this is gonna be on or off. So when it is checked, it will be on. In the other case, it will be off. So I have to use this object dot get attribute. And what is attribute name? Attribute name would be text, right? So text is something which is giving us on or off. So I should get, when we are clicking on it, we will get something, and again when we click on it, we will get the other option which is on or off. Just doing this again, Control C and Control V. Here, any questions in this part? Hello.
No, sir.
Okay. I'll just quickly run this and let's see how this will go in terms of execution. Yeah, so this is all about, so we are clicking on it, we're getting the status, and we are clicking on it and we're getting the status. No end is. Is that clear? So with that, we are good with this part. We covered so many elements so far, and I guess it's like we predominantly covered so many things. But let's move on to the next step now, which would be which were covered like advanced gestures in mobile automation. So this drag and drop, long press on a particular thing, uh, long press and doing some actions on it, and also these kind of things we are gonna study now: scrolling, long press, swiping, drag and drop. So these are all the advanced uh, you know uh, advanced actions on in terms of mobile operations. Okay, so what I'm gonna do now is so I'll just show you the context. I showed you something like drag and drop, right? It is there under views, drag and drop is there. But we also do have long press. The long press would be, I'm not sure where it is going to be. Let me just see where you would find out that. Okay, so we have views, expandable list, and we have this custom adapter, and here you would see something like people names. Okay, so when you long press this, when you click on this, you will not see this. Okay, when you long press this, you will see these buttons. So long press is different than clicking on it. So once you click on this, you will see these options, and you could even long press on this, and you could click on sample menu or sample action. Okay, so when you click on this, you will getting that Arnold. Okay, so that is a toast message. That's a different, completely different concept. We call them as toast. So when you long press on this and click on sample action, you will see uh, uh, this toast message. So we will get this one. This is called as toast message. We will cover this at later part of our discussions, but for now our interest would be these advanced actions like swiping, scrolling, drag and drop, long press, and all these things. Let's start with long press and taps, and then we will move on to drag and drop. Okay, so for that, the most important thing is, let me get rid of all the flow that we have already automated. Maybe for your reference, I'm copying and pasting this in the chat window so that you could take a backup of it if needed. I'll also try to create a GitHub folder, and I'll upload whatever we are seeing over here. So I'm also taking a backup of all of this, all of the things that we are doing. So for now, I'll just get rid of this particular class, and I'll go ahead and create a separate class for advanced gestures. I'll name this as advanced gestures. Now, the first important thing is we just need to invoke the driver, because we are no more actually creating a reusable components. So let me get the same code of invoking the driver from API demo flows. Copy this and come over here and copy the code and paste it over here. So now we are good with this. We should throw an exception. Do anyone know the shortcut for this? I actually forgot that. To bring this text to left side. Shift to side button or something.
Shift tab something.
Right, tab is something, but with shift tab, yeah, shift tab. Shift tab will bring the text backside, and tab will mm, take away from the original space to the right side. So now we got the shortcuts are also important. I'll tell you the reason why. Because when you're actually showing your screen and doing some stuff for them, like doing some sort of coding, if you're using shortcuts, it's an indication saying like you're much equipped, or much, I mean, what to say, you're more interactive with the IDE as well, which comes up with more experience, right? So the fresher or one who is freshly using it will not use the shortcuts so frequently. So when you use uh, shortcuts more frequently, it's an indication to them like you are more familiar with the IDE and the language, whatever you are using. So I'll just interpret that way. So I was like putting up shortcuts wherever I'm using. So again,
Any, sorry, sorry. Is there any shortcut for going to a class, like particular class, if we are writing in the main method and we are calling we are creating instance for that class, and like there will be many classes. So is there any shortcut to go to that particular class?
I mean, you could directly search if that is a class, which is control H, and you could give the class name over here, and you could directly search that. And whenever you want to traverse between the classes, you could use what is that? Alt, this one, Alt left and Alt right, so that it takes from the old edit. I mean, let me put it one by one. So control H is something which is used to search for the classes, methods, constructors, packages, whatever it is. Okay. But if you want to traverse between the windows, like let's say if you are editing on this and if you want to go back to the last window on which you have edited, and as the number of lists are piling up, you just need to expand this and go to your particular class when you're manually doing it. But with shortcuts, you could use Alt left button to go to the last edit thing, and go to the right and click on right button, so that you could come back to the old existing state. Okay.
Okay.
And even on the particular page, to go back to the last edit line and to the present line, there is a shortcut to actually go back to the last edit line and the the present edit line. I too forgot that, but control
So
L I guess. Uh-huh.
mm, is there
But
any document to
yeah, I
like
do have,
visualize it?
I placed all of them at one place. You could use this repository if you find this useful. There are so many things that are present over here, and one such as git commands. All the git commands are being placed over here. Okay. uh, so
Okay.
some windows commands, all the git commands are actually placed over here. You could use this. And for shortcuts as well, I do have, but I don't exactly remember where it is.
Okay. So
And
maybe
I'll
as
actually, yeah, I'll provide you something. Yeah, I got it now. So Control Shift L. Okay. Control Shift L will also give you the list of all the shortcuts that are available in Java. Okay.
oh,
So go to line, Control L, uh, go to matching bracket. These are all you could just get equipped yourself with one or two daily, so that you will on someday you will be more familiar with all of this. Control Shift L, remember that. And if you just do that, you will get all the shortcuts that you can use on this. Okay, so we were talking about something, right? Toggling between the lines, toggling full screen, Alt F11, toggle comment, Control Shift C, toggle breakpoint. So these are all the commands. What I'm talking about is switching between the lines. Control up. That's not sure. Huh. This is one thing. Alt up will move the line up. If you want to actually, let's suppose I want to move this line here or somewhere else, I don't really need to copy this and paste it. Just to select that, control just up button, so that you could place that line at wherever you want to. These are all like different shortcuts, which looks really wonderful when you're actually using that. Control Shift O, I was already saying to you that to actually import um, or to remove any unused or used imports, uh, collapse, commit, and there are many things. One important thing I would like actually trying to fetch you is, let's suppose I have 100 lines of code. Okay, from one function to the other function, if I have gone from one function to the other function in the same file, you could come back to the same line back again. I hope you're getting me. Let's suppose I have 1,000 lines of code. From line 9 to I have went to line 45, and line 45 to I went to line 90. And I shouldn't actually go ahead and search for line 9 again. I shouldn't, I mean, I may not be able to remember that, but there is a shortcut to come back to 45, come back to 9. So that shortcut is what I'm trying to fetch out. I used to use that frequently, but these days I'm using Python mostly, so I actually forget that. let me get that for you in the next session. Maybe this is not the right time, but you could actually figure out on your own. Control Shift L is something only, is the only thing that you have to remember, so that you will get all the shortcuts over there. So where are we now? Let's try to actually do this stuff. So our intention is to click on views, right? Have we went to views?
Yes, views.
Yeah, views. So let's figure out how to actually, I mean, views is something like the same, right? We already have the code. Let's use that the most. So we have this views button. I'm copying this and pasting it over here. Shift and down, Control V. And instead of preferences, I just need to go ahead and use views. I'll change this to views button. Copy this, paste it here. Control S. Okay. So once we clicked on this views button, click on this views button, and then we have to go to uh, what is that, expandable list. Yeah, so then we have to go to expandable list. So to go to expandable list, we have the code as well, right? Is this the one? No, from here on it's gonna change, right? So earlier we were on preferences, this is a different thing. Now let's develop a reusable component for the same, and let's try to just pass the name to that, like earlier how we have done, and that it acts as a reference purpose. So now I'll just have to close this, start session, go to views, refresh it, and now get all these elements, and try to click on the element just using the relevant name. So I could just reuse this code, copy paste this code and use it over here, and just change the XPaths and the names. That's all what we're gonna do here. So what is that? This is still Android widget text view only, so we don't need to actually change this to, the XPath would be same, but let's just change what we want to click on. So we want to click on expandable lists, right? Stop me when you're not able to follow anything, so that we could, I could explain that again. So this is something already we have done, so I was just using that code to just say expandable. It's like unique parameter. So expandable, this is sufficient because we were like just uh, using contents, so we don't need to pass the whole text. Instead we could just pass the subtext of it, which is expandable. So I'm passing expandable so that it actually clicks on that particular expandable list. And then again, what you have to do, after clicking on expandable button, you have to click on custom adapter. So custom adapter again would have the same class name, I guess. You could use the same. This will also have Android widget text view. Okay, so instead we could see on on every screen, if we have buttons, they have the same identifier, right? So what I'll do is I'll just make this as a reusable component, and I'll just try to call that every time instead of putting this whole bunch of code. I'll just create a static function, and I'll just call that public static click on text view. Okay, inside that I'll just paste my code to select this. All right. Okay, public static void. And to this we need two parameters. One is driver The other one is option to click. And we have to could even make this as static. Let me make this as a global variable so that we don't even need that too. Okay, so now we got this method available with us, and just call this method over here directly. You don't even need this extra variable. Click on text view, expandable. You understood this? Why we have done this way? Because every screen has the same elements, like the unique identifier for all these elements is text view only. Even this screen we have text view only, even in the next screen we have text view only. So instead we just created one function so that we could use that every time that you want to use expandable list. And let's see how this actually works. So click on text view and just call this method. Don't need to put that whole bunch of code. So we need custom adapter has to be given over here. Custom adapter. Got it. So we got this flow now. If I actually run this particular code, we just to make sure like we are actually reaching to the point where we want to actually do that long press. Null pointer exception. Why are we getting this null pointer exception? Driver is null. Can you tell me why? Why it's coming as null? You guys there?
I think we need to instantiate driver globally.
Yeah, we have done that, right?
I mean, the new Android driver.
This one globally.
Yeah.
No, the reason is we are creating a local variable over here again. So if you remove that, it points to the global variable and it stores the value in that variable so that we could directly use that. So I'm just trying to run this code again and let's see what happens. So now we are on the right place. Okay. So we want to do a long press now, not a click. There is a difference between click and long press. I told you, like you could even see that in UI. When you do a long press, you will see these options, but when you click on it, you will see these options. Now our interest is to see how to actually do a long press on this. Okay. So if you have to do some kind of long press in Selenium, what class you're going to use? I mean,
Action class.
Actions.
yes, actions is the class that we're going to use. So here we have something called as touch actions. I'll show you that, but there is a catch and there is an update on it too, which we're going to study later, but I'll tell you about it. The first thing is we have to identify this object pupil names, because this is on which we want to actually do a wrong press. Okay, so close this and inspect this again and start the new session to identify that element. Okay, views, expandable list, custom adapter, refresh, and get that object now. So get that object, and it has text as people names, so I'll use this text. I'll construct an XPath. Okay, I got this, and double forward slash star at the rate text is equal to paste this. Okay, now we got this. Next important thing is there is something called as tap actions, a class in Selenium, class in Appium that we're gonna use to actually perform these kind of operations, which is called as tap actions. Sorry, touch actions, not tap action. So touch action. So remove this and just put t is equal to new touch action. Okay. So remove this too. You don't need these arguments, and it expects a driver. Okay, that's all. So touch action is actually deprecated in the latest versions of Selenium, but in the very recent versions of Selenium, it got deprecated. uh, I'll show you the alternative of them as well, but you have to learn these touch actions because many of the projects are still using touch actions, and they were not right now built. You could see so many regression cases when you're actually working on real-time environments where you have to execute, and you could find out these touch actions. It's always worthwhile to actually study this, and the same will applies to the latest changes, which is W3C actions is what which is introduced in the latest versions of Selenium. So if you hover on this, uh, is deprecated, should get some text out of it. You should get a URL. Yeah, look at this. Touch actions are deprecated. Please use W3 actions instead, or the corresponding extension method for the driver if available. And there is an video also been provided, and this is the latest update being made in the latest versions. So because the Android got updated, and these guys also updated the actions in this Appium as well. uh, Android software came up with some features, and so they have updated this in both iOS and Android. So there is an YouTube link which you could even follow that, but we too will discuss this. But it is very important to understand touch actions first, and then we will go back to that particular stuff later. Okay, so in touch actions we have something called as uh, tap. That's what we are talking about, right? So tap is nothing but a click on uh, the button. On an Android, tap is nothing but click. So even if you click on it, it will do the same operation. Even if you tap on it, you will see the same operation. So this tap is actually expecting two options. One is point options and the other one is tap options. What are point options? Point options are when you want to actually operate on an element using coordinates. Okay, so when you want to act on an element using its coordinates, let's suppose I know the coordinates of this button. Instead of its properties, if I want to actually operate on this using some coordinates, then I should go ahead and use this particular, you see these bounds, these are called as the coordinates. Okay, so you could use this and try to click on it, and we all know it is not stable, and we don't use that anyways. The reason being why we don't use boundaries is it's strictly restricted to the coordinates. Okay, it doesn't know where it is actually clicking on. If dog names is there in place of people names, it clicks on the dog name because that is the coordinate which the dog name will have. Let's suppose I have very bigger screen than this. Okay, this is my screen size, but I'm actually running my scripts on some bigger screen in my regression phase. So in that case, when we are seeing bigger screen, everything will move up, right? So the dog name will come in place of pupil's name. So when you give this, when you are using the same coordinates, which are the coordinates for pupil names in your old device on which you developed your scripts, but when you're running your regression, the coordinates, those coordinates are applying for dog names because you are using some other device with a bigger screen. So that is the reason coordinate system is always unstable in automation. When there is a need to use coordinates, it is always good practice to not automate those cases, and mark them as non-feasible cases, because anyways, if you develop script with lots of effort, you couldn't see this ROA because it always needs manual intervention, support, everything. And it could support only a constant device, the same device every time on what you have developed. You have to use the same device for regression, which actually doesn't suffice our requirement of testing. So coordinate system will, you are no more going to use coordinates. I mean, you will never use coordinate system to be more precise. So but uh, point options are basically used for that. When you want to go ahead and use point options, you have to use coordinates, or vice versa. So when you want to use coordinates to act on a particular element, you have to go ahead and use point options. Coming to the tap options are used when we want to tap using element properties. Okay, element properties in the sense whether it is an XPath or you know uh, ID or whatever it is. In that case, you're gonna use tap options. So I'm gonna use tap options now. So we know like tap is expecting two options, so I'm going with tap options because I want to identify that element using its properties. So in the tap options, we have a method called as dot tap options. We have only one method which is to be called, because if you want to create any instance for the tap options, you have to call this method called as tap options, which gives the build or instance of that particular tap options. It creates an empty instance of tap options, that's all. So call tap options. On that instance, we have so many methods. Okay, so many methods we are there. Outside of that, we have one method which is with element. So just because we want to identify that element, right? So we want to do something with an element, so you have to use with element. So with element is again expecting a parameter called as element option. Okay, so you have to give element option inside that element option dot element. So to that element, you have to pass the web element that you want to. Okay, so to this element, I want to pass my web element. Web element is performance name. Okay, I'll just take this name, web element people names is equal to driver dot find element, and identify this, surround this with double quotes and double quotes, and put a semicolon over here. Remove one so that you will get rid of this error. Okay, I dot xpath, close it with this. We are good. So now we want to pass this web element inside this element options. So this is all about using tap options. Okay, you are going to use the same thing for most of the things. Okay, so for this, syntax is common for all the touch actions. So wherever you are using touch actions, the identifying an element would be the same. Okay, instead of tap, you just will change different other things. So if you want to do a long press on touch actions instance, we have that long press is expecting long press options. Under the long press options, we will have with element again. Okay, so using that with element, you just have to pass the web element so that long press will be happened on that particular thing. Is that clear? So what I'm saying is, on touch actions we will have different methods. Okay, you have to use those methods, and then you will have different options inside this. For tap we have tab options, for long press we have long press options. So we also have point options here, but you don't want to use point options because you don't want to stick with coordinate system. You want to identify the element using element properties. Okay, so that's how these are gonna work. Let's see whether tap is working or not. Tap is nothing but it's just a click on that particular element. So let me quickly run this and see the output. So it should just work like an click, because tap is same like click.
So white tap action is coming like that just because it is replicated.
Yeah, the reason is touch actions itself is deprecated in the latest versions of Appium, but so it's, you could suppress this, but I just want to tell you like this is something which is coming up or deprecated in the latest versions of Appium. But the reason why we are learning this is so many projects over there which are already built and regression to be supported. You should go ahead and you would see touch actions. Even if you downgrade the Appium version in this pom.xml, you still will see. If I go back and set something like 7.6.0, which is an old version, you won't see this thing over here. So touch actions was, you won't see touch actions. This AppiumBy is something we already discussed, right? This came in place of mobile buy. So mobile buy is something that was there earlier. AppiumBy was not there. AppiumBy itself is introduced in the latest versions of Appium. So maybe they could ask you what are the changes in the latest versions of Appium and all these things. So you could name few of them, like AppiumBy is one, touch actions is one. Touch actions has been replaced by W3 actions. Okay, right now in the latest versions of this thing, you got W3 actions in place of touch actions, and we would see this W3 actions too, but it's very important for you to understand from where it came from and how it actually works on. So I
So
was just
for
telling you.
interview perspective, is it important to know the version, what version we are using and all? So
From interview perspective, it's very important because I actually see like they will just try to understand whether you're really working or not. So whether you're really working or not, to understand that, the first basic question would be, what is the version of Selenium you're using? What is the version of Java you're using? What is the version of something you're using? Yeah, so that is the basic question, right? So you should be able to answer that, and you would also be should be able to answer, like if someone asks you what is the updates that happened in Java 8. So when you are able to answer that, they will know like you are actually working on and you are actually following it too. So that's a frequent question, even I think will be asked in the interviews. What is the version of Appium that you're using? If you're saying 7.6.0, what is the latest version? What are the new features that are introduced in latest versions of Appium? These are very important.
okay, got it. Thanks, sir.
Yeah. So we will see the replacement for this touch actions, but even I say even if you answer touch actions when they ask you about long press, it's completely okay. It's acceptable too. Okay, W3 actions, I don't
So,
see any of the projects are actually using that, and I mean they were not actually. I mean, if they are recently started, they will use them, but not really. Yeah. Any questions?
so, for that people names, would a symbol click work? Because the element says it's clickable.
Yeah, it work. Dot
Okay,
click
then why are we?
will even work that. I just want to show you what is tap and how to actually use that.
Okay.
So when someone asks you what is the syntax for tapping an element on mobile, you couldn't say dot click. You could say like this. Dot click is same like tap or tapping a button in mobile devices, but we have this separate syntax for tapping, and this is a syntax for dot click. That should be your answer.
Okay.
So we haven't given dot perform. That's the reason. It's like like we know like dot build dot perform. Dot build is used when you want to actually construct sequence of actions. You have seen this in actions class in Selenium, where when we will use build, we will use build when we will have multiple set of actions constructed. So dot perform is performing all those actions at a go, right? So that's how we actually do that. Hmm.
So we'll not
So
use build here.
no, we are not going to use build here.
Okay, only for Selenium we
Yeah.
use.
Yes.
Okay.
Let me just see. So this is what tapping on a button means. So let me quickly run this, and you should be able to see tapping on that particular element, which is like click. Once you click on it, it should get expanded, right? So tapping is working as expected. Now the whole intention is to do a long press. Do a long press. The syntax is t dot. What is that I have said? We have long press. Okay. On long press, what is that we have to give? Long press options. On long press options, get the instance of that long press, use dot long press dot with element. Okay, what is the element on which we want to do a long press? View button, not view button, right? Pupil names. So give that. Okay, and then what's there? Sorry, with element, inside that we just need to we need to give element options, right? Element options dot with element. Or somewhere we have gone wrong. With element options dot element, and here is where we have to pass. So I was telling you, right? So this is the same syntax we follow for everything. So if it is long press options, if it is tap options, long press options, and then call the instance, and then with element, and then element options dot element, and then element that you want to perform on. So it actually does a long press. How much duration you want to do that? With duration, it has to come inside. Yeah, dot with duration, you want to do that for some amount of time, right? So it is, you could see this is your indication. You don't need to remember anything, but this is your indication. It is expecting duration, so just type duration, control space, you'll get that. Dot, just type dot again and see the options, and you just say off seconds, and then give number of seconds that you want to wait for. At the end, after doing a long press for a duration of 2 seconds, what you want to do, you want to release that button. So dot release dot perform. This will do a long press on that button for 2 seconds. Again, t touch actions dot long press, and this is the syntax to identify an element with long press options. Long press options dot long press options dot with element and dot with duration for 2 seconds, and then you have to release and then perform. Do you think this is too long? The syntaxes are too long. Are you getting some kind of feel? So getting this instance with element, instead of that you could just pass the element, and if it could internally do that, it would be more good, right? So that's the reason this got deprecated in the latest versions. They simplified it a lot easier. So this whole syntax is just to identify an element, and we are passing that element to that with multiple instantiations. I mean, building internally and assigning this element to that class and all the stuff that we are doing. Anyways, so you just need to remember this. Long press is something under touch actions we will use for performing a long press. So long press options, we will pass with element options, and then with duration, number of seconds you want to do a long press, and then release and then perform. Let's quickly run this and see how this actually looks like on the screen. Tapping. Oh, we got something here. Let's understand what is the error. Stale element reference. Pupil names is not linked to the same object in DOM anymore. Why is this?
So when we tapped it, it's going to the next page.
Yeah, it's actually reloading the page or reassigning it. So let's remove tab for now. This is not our interest. Let's run it normally. Right click, run as Java applications. Got it. So we are able to do long press on it. So this is how we do long press uh, in Android. Okay, so that's about long press. And then let's automate this flow, which is swiping. So we do swiping in devices, right? For that I got something for you, which is views data widgets, and then dialog, not dialog, inline. So this is there, right? So we want to actually move this to different options. Okay, so this is what we are gonna do next. So we will just find out an element. Okay, so we have views and we have date widgets and inline. So what we're gonna do is we are just gonna do move this element from the source element to the destination element. Let's suppose if I give as 6, it should move to 6. When I give it as 10, it should move to 10. So this is something we're gonna do now. Okay, with um, we'll use this tap options only, but we will construct sequence of actions, and then we will actually achieve this. So this is something we will go ahead and start in the next session, and we will complete all the advanced gestures, and then we will move on to the real mobile devices. So we will see how to actually connect a real mobile device and what settings to be changed in the real mobile device, and how to actually check the UDID of the real mobile device, how to connect to an app, existing app. So still now we are just using app, and then we were actually trying to install that app every time onto the emulator. On emulator, it is completely worthy to do that, and feasible to do that, and okay to do that actually. But on real devices, you cannot install that every time. Let's suppose if you want to automate WhatsApp on your device, you cannot install WhatsApp every time on your device. Okay, so instead you should actually use the existing app and then do some operations on it. Okay, so we will see how to use app package, app activity of an app on real mobile device, and how to actually get them using APK info on real mobile devices and automating an app. Okay, so that's what we're gonna see in the next session. um, and also important thing would be, still now we are actually working on um, native apps, right? So we are working on native apps. So there are two other kinds of apps. One is um, mobile apps, I mean browsers, and the other one web apps, and the other one is hybrid apps, which is the combination of web apps and native apps. So that is what we have to cover. um, and these are the targets for us. So we will complete these advanced widgets, and then we will move on to the real mobile device. We will automate some part of native app. Let's take the example of WhatsApp, sending a message to a friend automatically by searching his name, typing a message, sending to it at frequent intervals or whatever it is. That's something we could achieve. Let's suppose the flow that let me also conclude the flow. I'll open my WhatsApp. Why I choose WhatsApp is it's like more funny way to do that, because that's something which we will use frequently, right? In that we will search a particular name, and we will actually search a particular name and open that contact, type a message and send that message to that particular contact. And we will also send at a particular time, which is user input. Let's suppose I say I want to send a message like hi to a contact, say XYZ, at a particular time, which is 12 p.m. at night. Okay, I mean 12 at night. So these are my inputs, and the script has to be behave accordingly. So time is something which we could input, but that would be achievable only with Jenkins integration. Um, but I'll also show you, like I'll take a short amount of time. When that time is matched with the system time, then the message will be sent. Let's suppose right now the time is 9:01 p.m. EST. So if I want to send the message at 9:03 p.m. EST, my script will check for the current time of my system to be updated to 9:03 p.m. Then only it will go inside that particular conditional statement, and it executes that particular flow. So that is what we are going to automate on real mobile device. And then we will switch on to uh, browsers. Automating a browser, like going to a particular URL, doing some stuff, how we do in Selenium. The same way we will launch the Chrome browser on mobile devices and automate some flow on mobile devices. We will do that on both Android as well as on real mobile device. And then we will move on to iOS part. iOS we will do the setup, because rest all the script would be same. I'll show you how to do simulator setup, and how to connect to a simulator setup, and how to launch it, how to launch an app, and how to actually operate on that app. A simple example, like a click or something. That's our forward steps towards this course, and let's see you all in the next session.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Hello.